The mysterious life-sized idol that suddenly appeared under the Bodhi tree was left there by someone. Then, the villagers started to encounter strange incidents, and every incident occurred in front of the idol. The incidents became increasingly severe, until eventually, someone in the village died in front of the statue. Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. This is the story of Pat. The events go back 6 years. Since Pat graduated in art, a friend who lived in the same village hired Pat to give private lessons on painting to her daughter. Pat's house and her friend's house were not far from each other because they were in the same village. Sometimes Pat would ride her bicycle to teach, or sometimes she would go by motorcycle. In the early days of teaching her friend's daughter, Pat often passed by a neighboring house that was rented out. A student who seemed to study sculpture rented the house. Since Pat passed by every day, she often saw this male student sculpting something almost every time. Even in the afternoon, when Pat took her friend's daughter to buy snacks, she saw the same man busy sculpting. Whenever Pat walked past, it seemed the student saw her too, but since they were not acquainted, Pat didn't talk to or greet him. After teaching her friend's daughter for quite a while, Pat got a new job and had to stop teaching. But every time she traveled to work, she still had to drive past that rented house. One day, Pat had to take her Chihuahua to get flea prevention treatment. She left around 3 in the afternoon and returned after 4. On her way back, she passed her friend's house as usual and saw her friend playing with her daughter. Pat decided to stop by to chat because she hadn't visited since starting her new job. While talking with her friend suddenly said, "Pat, do you remember the student who used to sculpt in the rented house next door?" Pat replied, "Yes, I remember. Why?" Her friend told her that he had moved out. Since Pat hadn't noticed lately, she asked, "Why did he move out?" Her friend explained, "He had to leave because he did something bad." Her friend described that the student behaved like a psychopath. He would suddenly grab the hand of the daughter of the grocery store owner or sometimes follow girls around. Whenever he had the chance, he would touch their hair or shoulders, trying to harass them. Since the villagers were quite close-knit, when anyone saw this behavior, they talked about it. Eventually, when the villagers saw it for themselves, they scolded him. It reached a point where no shop would sell him anything, and he couldn't stay there anymore, so he had to move out. After hearing this, Pat understood because the villagers in her village were indeed very close and looked out for each other. She didn't think much of it and continued chatting with her friend until almost 5:30. Seeing that it was getting late, Pat decided to go home. As she rode her motorcycle about 500 meters from her friend's house, she passed a large banyan tree by the roadside. This banyan tree had been there for a long time and was quite large. Beneath it, people often discarded holy objects or statues. Villagers who built new houses often dumped leftover materials like zinc, metal, or concrete there. Pat usually passed by regularly and wasn't afraid. But this time, as she passed, she had to stop because something caught her eye. Under the banyan tree stood a life-size statue, which was very large, resembling Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. The craftsmanship was about 160 centimeters tall. The strange thing about the statue was that it was made of cement, but the surface was green, covered with something that looked like moss. More frighteningly, the statue, which should have been majestic and revered, had long, deformed arms. Its neck and face were elongated, looking eerie. There was a palm-sized crack on its belly. At that moment, Pat didn't feel scared but found the statue strange and unique, unlike anything she had ever seen before. She decided to take her phone out from the basket of her motorcycle to take a picture of the statue. Just as she was about to take the photo, her chihuahua, which was sitting in the basket, started barking loudly and jumped around. Pat found this unusual because her dog was normally very calm and friendly, even with strangers. Her dog kept trying to jump out of the basket, so she had to reach in and hold it. She thought maybe her dog was in pain from the treatment it had earlier. Just then, a car drove up behind her, so she didn't have a chance to take the photo and had to drive away. Pat drove back home, still thinking about the strange statue and wondering who could have left such a large statue under the tree. She tried not to think much about it and went on with her day. The next morning, a neighbor named Aunt May came to visit Pat. Aunt May often shared gossip and stories about the village with Pat. This time, Aunt May told her that her son Adam had an accident last night while driving home with a friend. Pat was shocked and asked how Adam was doing. Aunt May said Adam had broken his leg, with the bone protruding, but his friend, who was riding with him, was not seriously injured. Since Pat had known Aunt May's family for a long time and Adam often played with Pat, she decided to visit Adam in the hospital. When she arrived, she saw Adam's friend, who was not seriously injured, sitting nearby. She approached and asked, "What happened? Why was the accident so bad? Were you drunk? Where did it happen?" Adam's friend explained that they had the accident near the banyan tree with the big statue. They hadn't been drinking, just riding back from another village. As they were about to pass the banyan tree, Adam suddenly shouted, "Hey, someone cut in front," and swerved the bike, causing them to crash right in front of the statue. Pat then had a chance to talk to Adam once he regained consciousness. Adam explained that as he was about to pass the banyan tree, he saw a figure of a woman emerge from the tree and rush toward him. In a panic, he swerved the bike, leading to the crash. Pat started to feel that something strange was going on. On her way back home, she stopped by the banyan tree to look. She saw the broken motorcycle fender exactly where Adam had said and found a piece of Adam's pants at the base of the statue. Pat stared at the statue, wondering if it had anything to do with the incident or if it was just a coincidence. She then noticed something odd. The crack on the statue, which was previously the size of a hand, had now extended up to its chest. Feeling scared, Pat decided to drive home. Once home, she went about her routine and went to bed as usual. As time passed, around 5 in the morning, Pat was abruptly awakened by the commotion of villagers shouting around the neighborhood. When she went out to see what was happening, she saw Aunt May standing with a group of other villagers. Pat walked over to ask what had happened and learned that an elderly villager named Uncle Smith had returned from his garden and somehow stumbled, falling onto some zinc sheets discarded under the Bodhi tree. His arm got caught on the edge of a large mirror there, almost severing it, leaving only a thin layer of skin holding it on. The villagers only discovered him around 4 in the morning, by which time he had passed out from blood loss. Fortunately, the hospital had called to inform them that Uncle Smith was now out of danger. Some villagers speculated that Uncle Smith was drunk and had stumbled, while others whispered about the curse of the statue. After the doctor treated Uncle Smith, the village head visited him and said, "Smith, why did you get so drunk? Drinking too much and losing control, then getting into an accident. What if you had died? You have no children. Next time, don't drink so much, so you don't trouble others." Uncle Smith turned slowly to the village head and said, "Who said I was drunk? I didn't have a drop of alcohol that day. I was walking home, passing the banyan tree, when suddenly a greenish arm came out of nowhere and grabbed me, causing me to fall. I blacked out instantly and only woke up in the hospital. While Uncle Smith was recounting his experience, Pat overheard the rescue volunteers discussing, "Who the hell left that statue there? It's creepy as hell. And why does that statue have a crack running from its stomach to its neck?" Uncle Smith's blood was all over the statue's face. Hearing this gave Pat goosebumps because earlier, the crack had only reached the statue's chest. Why had it extended up to its neck now? Pat was convinced this was no coincidence. She resolved never to drive that route again, planning to take an alternative way to work. However, circumstances forced Pat to drive past that route once more. On that day, Pat and her family traveled out of town. On the way back, it was very dark, and Pat's father was driving. As they approached the area near the banyan tree, everything seemed normal at first. Suddenly, everyone in the car saw what looked like the fine roots of the banyan tree hanging down, coming together and being thrown onto the car windshield. The sudden event startled everyone, causing Pat's father to swerve the car, nearly veering off the road. Fortunately, he regained control just in time. From what Pat saw, it seemed like someone had indeed thrown the roots because they swung from the left side of the car. As they drove back home, they felt as though something was hitting the car from side to side. Despite the strange occurrences, no one dared to speak up. Each person struggled to keep their composure until they finally arrived home. Once there, everyone went to bed, still shaken by the experience. And after that night, strange events started to happen more and more frequently. Pat's usually quiet village began to experience a curious phenomenon. Every night at 3 a.m., all the dogs in the village would get up and howl together. Some dogs that normally slept in front of Pat's house also joined in the howling. Even the stray cats in the village, which had never dared to come near Pat's house before, now took to hiding under her father's car. This went on for several days. Then an incident occurred that the villagers could no longer tolerate. There was a couple who worked as assistant chefs at a restaurant, two women named Kim and Joy. After work, they would often come to buy liquor from Pat's mother's store. Kim had a hot temper, and whenever she drank and got drunk, she would often beat Joy. Pat noticed that whenever they came to buy liquor, Joy's face was always swollen and bruised. The villagers had grown used to it because Joy loved Kim and accepted the abuse without running away. But on that day, after Kim bought liquor, she got drunk and beat Joy again. But this time, it was so severe that Joy could not endure it. She decided to run out of their room and hid in the room of the building owner. Since Kim was drunk, she followed Joy, but the building owner came out to stop her and shouted, "Kim, go calm down first. You can't just go around beating up a woman like this." At that moment, Kim was very angry and tried to calm down by walking away. Joy stayed in the building owner's room until morning. Later, several villagers came to find Joy, and what they said shocked her. The villagers told her that Kim had slit her own throat and died under the banyan tree that night. Everyone was shocked and rushed to see the scene. They found Kim's body lying there with blood pooled all around her, and her face turned towards the statue. What was even more shocking was that the crack on the statue's chest had now extended all the way to its mouth. At that moment, an old man named Uncle Jim, who lived in a house across from the banyan tree and on the other side of the river, approached the group of villagers and said, "This statue is bad. Ever since I saw the statue, there have been injuries and deaths. It's not a coincidence that these strange events keep happening one after another. The more people get hurt and die, the more terrifying the statue becomes. After the rescue team came to collect Kim's body, Uncle Jim went back home and brought 4 of his workers, each carrying a hammer. Uncle Jim instructed them to lay the statue down on the ground, and then they all started smashing the statue relentlessly. The villagers were shocked because they did not expect Uncle Jim to have the courage to do this. Other villagers were so scared that they did not dare to get involved with the statue. Uncle Jim said, "Whoever placed this statue here brought spirits and wandering souls into our village, making them stronger. If we leave it alone, it won't be just one death. There will be more and more deaths." After they finished smashing the statue, the next day, Uncle Jim brought a statue of the goddess Kali and placed it at the head of the bridge leading to his house, making sure it faced the banyan tree. Uncle Jim said that this goddess Kali statue had been properly consecrated because he knew a priest who helped him get it. Since the old statue was destroyed, the strange happenings in the village, including the nightly howling of dogs that Pat used to hear at 3 a.m., stopped. No one experienced any more strange incidents ever again.